The folded gala program reached the podium between two words of Lawrence Renaud's family remarks, and Mr. Halberd, who had been head butler to the Renaud house for 31 years, and who was standing at his usual quiet station 3 paces behind the lectern, saw the master of the family read it without breaking the line he was on. He finished the sentence. He set the program on the lectern shelf. He stepped down off the podium as easily as a man stepping out of a chair. And in the side gallery, on a small marble bench in a quiet alcove between 2 oil portraits, the cloakroom girl with her hand around Madame Constance Renaud's gloved hand was speaking to the matriarch in a steady, low voice the way a person speaks to someone they would not leave alone in any room in the world. 200 guests in the ballroom heard the applause come up exactly on cue and noticed nothing wrong. Mr. Halberd had been handed the folded program by a passing waiter at the side door. The waiter, a steady young man named Pascoe who worked the gala every winter, had been told only that a young woman in the side gallery had asked him, quietly, to bring this to the head butler. Pascoe had not run. He had crossed the floor with a tray of empty glasses so no one in the ballroom would notice him cross, set the tray down, pressed the program into Mr. Halberd's hand at his elbow, and stepped back into the room. Mr. Halberd had opened the page, read 4 lines of a young woman's careful handwriting, and walked the program 3 paces to the lectern. The handwriting on the inside of the gala program read, "Madame Renaud is on the bench in the side gallery near the portrait of the late Don Antoine. She is steady. She has missed her 7 o'clock dose. Please send her own nurse to the side gallery quietly. I am with her. L." That, Mr. Halberd would later think, was the entire night in 4 lines. Lawrence Renaud was 41 that winter. He had been the head of the family for 9 years, since the morning his father had died at his desk with an unfinished letter under his hand. He stood at the lectern in a tailored charcoal 3-piece suit with a black tie, his short dark hair graying lightly at the temples. He had read the 4 lines without his expression moving, completed the sentence, a sentence about his late father's foundation, and the 17 years it had funded the city's home nursing program for the elderly, folded the program, nodded once at the foundation chairwoman who was to speak next, and stepped down. He walked the length of the ballroom unhurried, through guests who turned to make space for him without knowing why, and went back to their conversations as soon as he had passed. Mr. Halberd followed him at the proper distance, with the home nurse, Miss Odieva, who had been with the Renaud house 3 years, and who was at that moment standing in the staff corridor with her medicine bag at her feet and her face white, at his elbow. Miss Odieva had not been able to find Madame Renaud for the last 11 minutes. She had been looking. She had asked 2 waiters. She had walked the ballroom. She had not thought of the side gallery because Madame Renaud had never walked the side gallery alone in 9 years. The matriarch was 77 that winter. She wore a long navy gown and a single pearl at her throat and walked with a thin ebony cane. She had attended every Renaud gala since her husband had founded it in his lifetime. Miss Odieva, in the rush of the evening, the press of the photographers, the matriarch's wrap caught on a coat pin, the late arrival of 2 old family friends, had not given the 7 o'clock dose. She had meant to. She had been carrying the small enamel pillbox at the foot of the stairs and had been pulled into a conversation about the seating at the head table. The pillbox had gone back into the bag. By 8:30, Madame Renaud, sitting at the head of the family table with her cane against her chair, had begun to feel a quiet swimming behind her eyes she knew well. She had not made a scene. She had risen with the soft excuse of a woman seeking the powder room and walked, with her cane and her steady manner, out of the ballroom and through the gilded archway into the side gallery, a long quiet corridor of family portraits, and sat down on the small marble bench in the alcove between the portrait of her late husband and the portrait of his mother before him. She had folded her gloved hands in her lap. She had begun, very quietly, to ask for her son in a voice no one in the ballroom could hear. Leah Mertens was 24. She had been hired through the hotel for the night to staff the cloakroom in the side corridor off the main gallery. She wore the hotel's plain black uniform skirt and a pressed white blouse, her dark hair pulled back into a low bun with a few loose strands at her temple. She had grown up with a grandmother who had had the same swimming, half-frightened look in her eyes once a winter, and she knew the look on a woman's face when a dose has been missed. She had been carrying a stack of spare gala programs back to her counter when she saw the elderly woman on the bench in the alcove, registered the look and stopped, and set the programs down on a side table without a sound. She had not called out. She had crossed the marble in 7 quiet steps and knelt on one knee on the rug beside the bench, low enough not to loom, and laid her own bare hand very gently on the matriarch's gloved one. Madame, she said in a steady, low voice, my name is Leah. I work the cloakroom tonight. May I sit with you a moment? The matriarch had turned her head. She had looked at the young woman with the kind face and the warm brown eyes. She had drawn a careful breath. I would like that very much, she said. What is your name, please, Madame? Constance Renaud. Madame Renaud, have you had your 7 o'clock? The matriarch had closed her eyes for a moment. I have not, she said. I do not know how. My nurse, she is in the ballroom. That is all right, Leah said. She is steady, your nurse. She is. Then we will bring her here quietly with your son. May I send a note? Send a note, child. Leah had taken one of the spare programs and the short pencil she kept in her apron for cloakroom tickets, and on the inside of the program, in her steady, careful hand, she had written 4 lines and folded it in 3. She had not stood up. She had taken the matriarch's gloved hand back into her own and held it, and turned her head only to call once, softly, across the corridor to the waiter she trusted. Pasco, please bring this to Mr. Halberd. Walk. Pasco had taken the folded program. He had walked. Leah had not let go of Madame Renaud's hand for the 11 minutes it took her son to come. She had spoken to the matriarch the whole time. She had told her plainly that the program was on its way to the head butler, that her own nurse would be beside her in a quarter of an hour, that her son was being told and would come. She had told her she had a grandmother who had had this swimming feeling in winter, and that it passed. She had told her the portrait above the bench was a good portrait. The painter had caught the late Don Antoine's mouth exactly. She had told her, when the matriarch's hand tightened on hers, that no one was going to leave her. Madame Renaud had said, after a while, in the dignified, clear voice Mr. Halberd had known for 31 years, "Thank you, child. You have been kinder to me than anyone in the room tonight." Leah had said, "I am glad I was passing, Madame." The matriarch had said, "What is your full name, Leah?" "Mertens. Leah Mertens. I will remember it." When Lawrence Renaud came into the side gallery, he came alone. Mr. Halberd had paused at the gilded archway to close the door behind the family quietly, and he came slowly, the last 6 paces, the way a man approaches a horse he does not wish to startle. He saw his mother on the bench. He saw the young woman in the black skirt and the white blouse on one knee beside her with his mother's gloved hand inside her bare one. He went down on one knee on the rug on the matriarch's other side and laid his own hand over his mother's other glove. "Mammon," he said. "Lawrence, I am sorry I was at the podium." "Do not be sorry. This young woman has been very kind." He turned his head. He looked at Leah Mertens across his mother's lap. He looked at her face, the warm brown eyes, the loose strand at her temple, the steady mouth, and he did not speak for a long second. Mr. Halberd, who had reopened the gilded archway a crack so that Miss Odieva could come through with her medicine bag without being seen from the ballroom, saw the master of the family take in the young woman's face the way a man reads a page he has been looking for in a book he did not know he owned. The master did not say anything at first. He inclined his head, a small, full bow, not the half-nod of a host, but the bow of a man thanking a person who has done something for which thanks is too small a word. Then he said, "Miss Mertens, thank you." Leah said quietly, "I was glad to be passing, sir." Miss Odieva came through the archway with the small enamel pillbox and a glass of water on a folded napkin. She knelt at the matriarch's knee. She apologized plainly, the apology of a professional who will not blame the evening for it, and gave the dose. The matriarch swallowed it. She sat with her son's hand on one side and the cloakroom girl's hand on the other, drew a steadier breath, and after 7 minutes said in her own dignified voice, "I think I would like to go home now." The family's car was called. Mr. Halberd brought the matriarch's wrap from the cloakroom himself. Leah would not leave the bench while she was wanted, and laid it across her shoulders. Lawrence Renaud lifted his mother to her feet with one careful arm. The two of them passed back through the gilded archway and out through the side door, and not a single one of the 200 guests in the ballroom registered a thing. Leah Mertens went back to the cloakroom counter. She put the spare programs away in the drawer. She closed out her tickets at midnight and walked home in her own coat in the cold to the small 4th-floor apartment she rented over a tailor's shop on the south side of the city. She did not tell her flatmate. She did not tell anyone. She did not even tell the second cloakroom girl on her shift. The next morning, a black car pulled up to the curb under her tailor's window at 9:30. The driver carried up an envelope of plain cream paper, hand addressed in a man's careful hand, and a small leather case. Leah signed for both in her bathrobe with her hair still wet, and opened the envelope sitting on the edge of her bed. The letter was in Lawrence Renaud's own hand. He thanked her by name for what she had done. He told her his mother had named her a guest of the Renaud family for life, and would be honored if she would come to her 78th birthday the following month. He told her the Renaud Foundation had a small permanent post, a coordinator for the home nursing program his late father had founded, that would shortly be advertised, and that he would consider it a kindness if she would interview for it on her own terms, with no obligation, when she was ready. He had also enclosed a small bank draft, not a tip, not a payment, a gift, he wrote, for the kindness no one had asked her to give. Leah read the letter twice. She read the bank draft. She set the draft on the little wooden table by her bed and sat by the window for a quarter of an hour, looking out at the tailor's awning, and then she took a sheet of her own letter paper and wrote in her own hand, "Mr. Renaud, I will come to your mother's birthday. I will speak with the foundation on Tuesday. I do not accept the draft because what I did, anyone with eyes should have done. L." She sealed the envelope. She slid the bank draft back inside, folded once, with the note. She gave both to the driver at her door before he had finished the cigarette he had been smoking under the awning. Mr. Halbert, who had served 3 generations of Renauds, and who in 11 years had not seen the master of the house smile once at his own private desk, walked into the study that evening with the tea tray and saw Lawrence Renaud read the young woman's note alone in the lamplight, and then sit very still for a long time with the page in his hand. Then he saw the master fold it once carefully and slide it into the small drawer of the late Don Anton's old writing desk, the drawer in which the old Don had kept the few letters his wife had written him in 50 years of marriage, and turn the small brass key in the lock. And then Mr. Halbert, who had been about to set the tea tray down and leave, saw the master of the Renaud family smile slowly once to himself. Leah Mertens came to the matriarch's birthday in a plain dark dress with a small silver pin at her throat that had been her mother's. She brought the matriarch a posy of winter violets from the flower cellar on her own street. Lawrence Renaud, when the tea was carried in, took a cup from the tray himself and brought it to her where she sat on the small sofa beside his mother. He did not speak much. He stood near. He listened to her ask after the home nursing coordinator's hours and the foundation's older clients by name. He watched her laugh once, very softly, at something the matriarch said about the painter who had done the late Don's portrait. He took the empty cup back to the tray himself when she had finished it. The matriarch said, in a low aside to Mr. Halbert at the doorway when she thought neither of them could hear, "He has been alone too long. That girl has good hands." The foundation hired Leah Mertens on her own terms on a Tuesday in February. She kept her own apartment over the tailor's. She kept her own hours. She came twice a week to the family house in the afternoons, not on foundation business, but at the matriarch's request, to read aloud in the sunroom from the small shelf of books the late Don had loved. The matriarch chose the books. Leah read in her steady, careful voice. Mr. Halbert brought the tea. By the 3rd Tuesday, Lawrence Renaud was home on a Tuesday afternoon. He sat in the chair across from her. He did not speak much. He listened. He learned the sound of her laugh, small, surprised, like a person who has been alone with the joke for a moment before sharing it. By the matriarch's 78th winter, 6 months after the night of the gala, the family had gathered around the sunroom table on a Sunday with the matriarch at its head and Leah in the chair beside her, and the room had felt whole in a way Mr. Halbert had not seen it feel since the old Don's day. That evening, after the family had gone, Lawrence Renaud walked Leah Mertens to the door of the family house himself. He stopped on the step with her under the lamp. He did not take her hand. He said in his quiet voice, "Miss Mertens, I would like to ask you something plainly. I have no claim. I would like, if you will consider it, on your own terms in your own time, to court you. May I?" Leah Mertens looked up at him under the lamp. Her face was steady. Her warm brown eyes did not lower. "Yes, Mr. Renaud," she said. "On my own terms, in my own time, you may." Mr. Halbert, who had been standing very still at the inside of the open door with her coat folded over his arm, closed the door behind her quietly after she had gone, and went to put the kettle on for the master of the house himself, and did not speak of any of it to anyone for the rest of his days.